Hey there! Today I'm going to show you my version of metal widening the front fenders of my R34. These are GTT front fenders, so they're a bit too skinny for a wider set of wheels and tires, so I'm going to rectify that now. I won't be using a flare that can be welded on, as I want to retain the OEM body line, so instead I'll be cutting alongside this line and pull it out in place where I want it to be. As you can see, I already put the car on ramps and a few wooden planks, so the front wheels are leveled out. But as soon as I made some relief cuts, I'll try to lower it a bit further so I can use these 285 tires as backstops. Now, because I want to adjust the fender to the front bumper, so I have to do barely any adjustment on the bumper itself, I will have to do this via two steps. In step 1, I will modify this bit here, so this entire line moves outwards, and I'll do that by cutting alongside here, as well as underneath, and then weld in a tiny piece of sheet metal underneath. And in step 2, I will make up the new fender line, and I will weld a larger piece of sheet metal all over here. So, let's get going. But first, I will start to get everything masked up, and then we can start cutting. Okay, I got both sides cut out now, and I'll start by welding in a piece of metal underneath here, so this is getting fixated, and after that I'm gonna start getting this part into shape the way I want it to be. To get a rough shape of the sheet metal that I'm gonna cut out now, we used a welding filler wire to get the rough shape outside here, and then we taped it up and we made a line here, so I'm gonna cut along those lines. I'm gonna transfer this tape onto the sheet metal and then cut it out. So I cut these from like 1.5 millimeter thick steel, and now I'm just going to clean up the edges all around, and then I'm going to give them a slight bend and try to weld them in place on the fenders.
got everything tacked in place now, and now I'm gonna keep going around making a ton of little tacks, and then when I'm done I'm gonna grind them down. Just have to try avoid getting too much heat into the panel so it doesn't warp too much. Other than that, rinse, repeat, and do it on the other side as well. I now have both flares welded on, and I put the wheels back on to see where we stand, and all I gotta do is fill out all these little gaps now.
I'm using a 0.8mm filler wire on my MIG machine and have it set just right so I can get perfect penetration.
It'll help me having enough material on both sides to grind down again, plus this will never come apart again. Now I popped the bumper back on again because I want to tackle this part next. The bumper itself has a bit of a curve to it, and I want to get this part on the fender as close as possible. The underneath is still not welded shut, so I should be able to get this really close here, and then I can close all the gaps up. On the last bit to the left, the gap is simply a bit too big to weld up like that, so I'm gonna weld in a small cutout when I have the fender on the bench. Both sides are now ground down to where I'm happy with, and next I'll take them over to the bench.
On the bench I'll cut out the inner structure I left underneath the piece I welded in. This is done, by the way, to retain some strength and avoid any more than necessary warping.
I'll also patch up the last gaps, as well as do some panel beating, so I have to use as little body filler as possible.
I now spot welded in the plates, and I decided I'm going to use my TIG machine to weld up the rest, because it's a much neater and nicer process. Truth is, I should have been doing the same thing on the outside already, but that's fine. I'm gonna have to do the 964 next anyway. I decided to go for a sort of hybrid finishing process. I will be tinning the fenders as well as do a skim pass with metal or rather aluminium body filler.
I'm using tin because I don't fancy lead in the slightest, and in the end it's gonna be the same thing, just a bit harder to work with. On the bright side, it will be a much harder material in the end compared to lead. And the aluminium body filler is what was recommended to me to use instead of leading in general, as it is no longer permitted to be used in professional workshops. So what I'm going to do is fill the deeper cavities with the tin and then pass over everything with a metal body filler.
The tinning process is pretty straightforward on paper.
Spread this bonding liquid on, heat it up until it shimmers, and wipe it with a clean towel to leave a shiny bonding surface for the tin. Okay, both sides are now tinned up and ground down, and you can really see from the color difference where the tin has settled.
This was really tough to work with, and I can't say I'd recommend it. Would it have been lead, it would have been probably much easier.
But for my purposes, this is perfect, and now I can skim coat everything with the aluminium body filler. Right after another quick ham and dolly session, because I noticed quite some warping from all the heat input.
It's a couple of weeks later now because I brought all the parts to the paint shop and I have them back now. Bear in mind that the entire car has to be brought in still to be blended properly, but let's have a look for now. Also keep in mind, this is my very first time doing this, and yet I feel the result is pretty incredible. So if I can do it, you can as well.
So if you have questions about the process or things I didn't mention, please let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to answer everything I can.
See you on the next one.